She was mocked just for wearing a simple cotton dress, forced to play the violin as a joke. A wealthy woman pointed and laughed. She probably only knows children's songs. A young musician smirked and offered a violin. If you dare try playing something difficult. The crowd roared. Someone started live streaming, waiting for her to fail. But 30 seconds later, she was playing the hardest piece in the world, Paganini's Caprice No. 24 and the entire ballroom froze. Lisa Adams stood in the middle of the chaos, her breath steady, her eyes calm. The New York Gala was a glittering affair, all crystal chandeliers and polished floors packed with musicians, socialites, and press. She'd come with a colleague, Tom, a quiet guy from her old music publishing days. Her gray cotton dress hung loosely, no frills, no shine. Her hair was pinned back neat but plain, her face bare of makeup. A thin silver ring on her left hand was her only adornment. She didn't look like she belonged among the sequins and silk, and that's exactly how she wanted it. Lisa had learned early to fade into the background. Her family, old money, powerful, untouchable, had taught her to carry herself with restraint. Never flaunt, her mother's voice echoed a lesson from childhood. But tonight, fading wasn't an option. It had started so quietly. Lisa was near the bar holding a glass of water, listening to a group nearby argue about violin techniques. Their voices were sharp, each trying to outdo the other. She stayed silent, her fingers brushing the strap of her simple canvas bag. She'd been to galas like this before, back when she was a scholarship student playing for rooms just like this one. She didn't miss the spotlight. She'd left it behind years ago, choosing a quieter life. But the woman in the sequined gown, Margaret Voss, a patron known for her sharp tongue and sharper checkbook, spotted her. "You," Margaret said, her voice cutting through the chatter. "What are you doing here, sweetheart?" Her smile was all teeth, her diamonds catching the light. Lisa looked up, her face polite but guarded. "I'm a guest," she said softly. Margaret laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "A guest? In that dress? Oh, honey, you're lost." The group around her, wealthy patrons, a few young musicians, turned their eyes, sizing Lisa up. A man in a velvet blazer, his cufflinks glinting, leaned in. "Bet she's here to clean up after us." The laughter was instant, loud, slicing through the hum of the room. Lisa's hand tightened on her glass, but her expression didn't change. She set the glass down, her movements slow, deliberate, like she was grounding herself. A woman in a sleek black gown, her hair pulled tight in a bun, stepped forward, her eyes narrowing as she looked Lisa up and down. She was Claire Hammond, a gallery owner with a reputation for gatekeeping the art world. "Honestly, dear, you're an eyesore," Claire said, her voice dripping with disdain. "This is a gala, not a thrift store." She waved a manicured hand at Lisa's dress, her rings flashing. "Did you think nobody would notice you standing there looking like a maid?" The crowd around her snickered, a few nodding in agreement. Lisa's jaw tightened just for a moment, but she didn't respond. She adjusted her bag, her fingers lingering on the strap as if reminding herself to stay steady. Claire smirked, turning to Margaret. "Some people have no sense of place." The laughter grew and a few phones came out, snapping photos of Lisa's plain dress, her face a quiet mask. Margaret wasn't done. She stepped closer, her perfume heavy, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "What's your name, dear? Don't be shy." The crowd was growing now, drawn by the promise of a scene. Lisa met her eyes, her voice steady. "Lisa Adams." Margaret's laugh was louder this time. "Lisa Adams. Sounds like a nobody. Do you even know where you are?" A woman next to her, younger, in a red dress that clung too tightly, chimed in. "She probably wandered in from the subway." More laughter, sharper now, like a blade finding its mark. Lisa didn't flinch. Her fingers brushed the edge of her bag again, a small gesture nobody noticed. She'd heard this before, different rooms, different faces, same cruelty. Growing up, her parents had been relentless about discipline. Her father, a man who could silence a boardroom with a glance, had taught her to hold her ground without raising her voice. Her mother, elegant but firm, had shown her how to let actions speak louder than words. Lisa had taken it further, choosing plain clothes, no makeup, no show. People judged her for it, called her poor, plain, out of place. She let them. It was easier than explaining the truth. As Lisa stood there, a man in a tailored gray suit, his tie a loud shade of green, pushed through the crowd. He was Gerald Pike, a music critic known for his biting reviews and sharper tongue. He held a glass of champagne, tilting it toward Lisa like a weapon. "Look at her clutching that bag like it's her lifeline," he said, his voice carrying over the chatter. "What's in there, darling?" "Your bus fare home." The crowd howled some clapping as if he'd scored a point. Gerald leaned closer, his breath sour with alcohol. "You're out of your league, sweetheart. Why don't you scurry back to wherever you came from?" Lisa's eyes flicked to his calm but unflinching. She shifted her weight slightly, her silence louder than his taunts. Gerald smirked, turning to the crowd. "See? She knows she doesn't belong." A woman nearby snapped a photo, giggling as she typed a caption on her phone. The young violinist Ethan Carter stepped forward. He was in his mid-20s, hair slicked back his suit tailored to show off his rising star status. He held a violin, its wood gleaming under the lights. "Hey, Lisa," he said, his grin wide, mocking. "Why don't you play something for us? Don't be shy." The crowd cheered, sensing blood. Lisa shook her head, her voice calm. "No, thank you. I'm just here to listen." But Margaret clapped her hands, delighted. "Oh, come on. Give us a show." Someone else shouted, "Play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star." The laughter swelled, a wave crashing over her. A woman in her 30s, dressed in a shimmering gold jumpsuit, pushed to the front, her heels clicking loudly on the floor. She was Vanessa Tate, a socialite with a massive online following and a knack for turning moments into viral content. She held her phone up, already filming. "Oh, this is too good," Vanessa said, her voice syrupy with mockery. "Look at her standing there like a deer in headlights. Sweetie, you're not fooling anyone." She zoomed in on Lisa's dress, her laughter sharp. "Who let you in here? Did you sneak past security?" The crowd roared, some mimicking her by raising their own phones. Lisa's fingers paused on her bag, her face still but her eyes darkened slightly, a flicker of something unreadable. Vanessa turned to Margaret, still filming. "This is going straight to my story. #Gala disaster." The crowd's laughter was relentless, a wall of sound pressing in on Lisa. Ethan thrust the violin toward her, his eyes gleaming. "Unless you can't, that's okay. Not everyone's cut out for this." The crowd was relentless now, their voices overlapping. "Go on. Don't chicken out. Just try." Tom, standing off to the side, touched her arm, his face tight. "Lisa, you don't have to do this." But the pressure was a living thing, the crowd's energy feeding on itself. A man in the back, his phone already out, yelled, "Live streaming. Now get ready for the worst violin solo of the year." Lisa stood still, the violin in Ethan's hand, like a challenge she hadn't asked for. Something shifted in her. Not anger, not fear, just a quiet resolve, like a switch flipping. She looked at Ethan, her eyes steady. "All right," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She took the violin, her fingers brushing the polished wood. The crowd roared, thinking they'd won. Margaret clapped again, her face alight with glee. "This is why I love these galas, free entertainment." Ethan crossed his arms, smirking. "Go ahead, Lisa. Wow us." Lisa didn't look at him. She adjusted the chin rest, her movements precise, almost reverent. The room didn't notice. They were too busy laughing, too busy waiting for her to fail. As Lisa held the violin, a man in a white tuxedo, his hair dyed an unnatural blonde, stepped forward, his voice loud and theatrical. He was Roland Finch, a Broadway producer with a flair for drama and a habit of humiliating anyone who crossed his path. He gestured at Lisa like she was a prop in his show. "Oh, darling, you're breaking my heart," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Standing there with that sad little violin looking like you're about to cry. He turned to the crowd, his hands spread wide. "Shall we give her a round of pity applause?" The crowd obliged their claps, slow and mocking, some adding exaggerated boos. Lisa's shoulders stayed straight, but her fingers tightened on the bow, her knuckles pale. Roland leaned in, his voice lower, crueler. "Run along, sweetheart. You're ruining the vibe." A woman nearby laughed so hard she spilled her drink, the liquid splashing close to Lisa's shoes. "Hey, before we go any further, can you do me a quick favor? Grab your phone, hit that like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe to the channel. It means the world to keep sharing stories like Lisa's stories about standing tall when the world tries to knock you down. Just takes a second and it keeps us connected. Thanks for being here with me." The stage wasn't a stage, just a cleared space near the grand piano where performers had been dazzling the crowd all night. Lisa stepped into it, the violin in one hand, the bow in the other. The crowd pressed closer, their phones raised, ready to capture the disaster. Margaret leaned toward Vanessa, her voice loud enough for everyone. "This is going to be priceless." Vanessa nodded, her lips curled. "She's going to embarrass herself." A waiter passing by his tray, wobbling, paused to watch his face, a mix of pity and curiosity. Before Lisa could lift the violin, a teenage girl in a glittering tiara, the daughter of a famous conductor, pushed through the crowd. Her name was Sophia Lang, and her spoiled demeanor was as well known as her father's baton. She pointed at Lisa, her voice shrill. "Oh my God, is she actually going to play?" Sophia set her laugh high and piercing. "This is like watching a dog try to dance." She turned to her friends, a group of equally polished teens who giggled on cue. "Look at her shoes. Did she dig those out of a dumpster?" Sophia stepped closer, her tiara glinting, and flicked her hand toward Lisa's dress. "You're a walking charity case. Get off the stage before you humiliate yourself." Lisa's eyes met Sophia's for a moment, calm but unyielding, before she looked away, adjusting the violin's strings. Sophia smirked, tossing her hair. "This is why we have standards." The crowd's laughter was deafening, a few shouting, "Get her off!" Lisa tightened the bow, her fingers moving with a quiet confidence that went unnoticed. She lifted the violin, tucking it under her chin. Her posture was flawless, spine straight, shoulders relaxed, the instrument an extension of her body. An older man in the back, a violinist named Victor with gray hair and a face lined from years on stage, sat up suddenly. His eyes narrowed like he'd seen something the others hadn't. But the crowd was too loud, too caught up in their game. "Play something," the man in the velvet blazer shouted. "Don't just stand there." Another voice, younger, crueler. "Bet she doesn't even know how to hold it right." As Lisa adjusted the violin, a woman in a corner seated at a table with a stack of programs caught her eye. She was Eleanor Price, a retired music professor who'd taught at Juilliard decades ago. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched a program, her eyes fixed on Lisa's form. She leaned toward her companion, a younger woman, and whispered, "That's not a beginner's grip." Her voice was low, urgent, but the crowd's noise drowned it out. Eleanor's fingers traced the edge of the program where Lisa's name wasn't listed. She shook her head, muttering, "They have no idea." The companion frowned, confused, but Eleanor's gaze stayed on Lisa like she was seeing a ghost from her past. The moment passed unnoticed, the crowd too focused on their mockery to care. The laughter swelled, and someone started chanting, "Twinkle, twinkle." Others joined in their voices, a mocking chorus. Lisa closed her eyes for a moment, just a heartbeat. The room seemed to fade, and for a split second she was somewhere else, a small practice room years ago, her teacher's voice steady in her ear. "Feel the music, Lisa. Let it carry you." She opened her eyes and looked at Ethan. "What should I play?" she asked, her voice soft but clear, cutting through the noise. Ethan laughed, glancing at his friends like he'd just been handed a gift. "Oh, you're serious? Okay, let's make it fun." He paused, milking this moment, his grin widening. "If you're brave, try Paganini's Caprice No. 24. You know, the hardest violin piece in the world." The room exploded in laughter so loud it echoed off the chandeliers. Margaret clapped, delighted. "Oh, this I have to see." Vanessa pulled out her phone, zooming in. "This is going viral." Even Tom, standing off to the side, looked nervous. His hands clenched, his eyes darting between Lisa and the crowd. Lisa didn't flinch. She nodded just once, like she was accepting a simple request. "Okay," she said. The crowd roared again, thinking she was delusional. Someone yelled, "Good luck with that." Another voice, "She's gonna butcher it." But Lisa didn't move. She lifted the bow, her hand steady, and placed it against the strings. The room was still laughing, still jeering when she played the first note. It was sharp, clean, like a blade cutting through the chaos. The laughter faltered. She played the next note, then the next, each one precise, each one alive. The opening of Paganini's Caprice No. 24 unfolded, and the room started to quiet. Her fingers moved across the fingerboard, effortless, hitting every double stop, every harmonic with a clarity that felt almost inhuman. The crowd's smiles faded. Phones lowered slightly, their owners too stunned to keep filming. Victor, the older violinist, leaned forward, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. Halfway through the first variation, a man in a navy suit standing near the stage dropped his glass. It shattered on the floor, the sound barely registering over Lisa's playing. He was Michael Reed, a talent scout who'd discovered some of the biggest names in classical music. His face was pale, his eyes wide as he watched Lisa's fingers dance. He turned to his assistant, his voice a hoarse whisper. "That's Lisa Adams. I saw her play at 17. She was untouchable." His assistant frowned, confused, but Michael shook his head, his hands trembling. "She disappeared after that recital. Nobody knew why." He stared at Lisa like he was seeing a miracle unfold. The crowd didn't hear him, but his reaction rippled through those nearby, a quiet wave of doubt. She reached the first variation, her bow dancing through the impossible runs. The notes weren't just correct, they were alive, full of fire and grief and everything in between. Margaret's smile was gone, her hand frozen mid-gesture. Vanessa lowered her phone, her mouth slightly open. Lisa's face didn't change. She wasn't performing for them. She was somewhere else, lost in the music, her body swaying slightly as the notes poured out. A memory flickered her at 17, practicing in a cramped studio, her fingers bleeding, her teacher nodding. "You're ready, Lisa. The world's waiting." As Lisa hit the double stops, a woman in a pearl necklace seated near Victor clutched her program tightly. She was Beatrice Klein, a former symphony board member who'd once reviewed scholarship applications. Her eyes widened as Lisa's bow moved, each note a memory. She leaned toward her husband, her voice barely audible. "I know that technique," she said, her hands shaking. "She was the prodigy we funded, the one who turned down the spotlight." Her husband frowned, but Beatrice's gaze was locked on Lisa, her face a mix of awe and guilt. She'd assumed Lisa had faded into obscurity, but now watching her command the room, she realized the truth. The crowd's mockery had blinded them all. The piece grew harder, left-hand pizzicato blistering scales chords that seemed to defy physics. She didn't miss a single one. Her fingers were a blur, but her expression stayed calm, almost serene. Ethan's smirk was gone, his arms uncrossed, his face pale. The crowd was silent now, not a whisper, not a cough. Even the live streamers had stopped narrating. All they could do was watch. The waiter, still holding his tray, stood frozen, his eyes wide. A woman in the front row, a famous violinist named Clara, with tears in her eyes, pressed her hands to her chest. When Lisa reached the final variation, a man in a corner, his face half hidden by a pillar, stepped forward slightly. He was Paul Grayson, a journalist who'd covered the music scene for decades. He pulled out a small notebook, his pen moving quickly as he scribbled. He'd recognized Lisa the moment she took the violin, her grip a dead giveaway. Years ago he'd written about her debut, calling her the future of violin. Now watching her silence the room, he knew this was bigger than a performance. He jotted down a headline, "The Gala That Misjudged a Master." His quiet presence went unnoticed, but his notes would shape the story the world would soon read. By the time Lisa hit the final variation, the one that made even the best violinists sweat, she had the room in her hands. The notes flew impossibly fast, each one perfect, each one a statement. Her gray dress swayed as she leaned into the music, her pinned hair catching the light. She wasn't just playing, she was commanding. And when she reached the last note, a single haunting tone that seemed to hang in the air, she lowered the bow and stood still. Silence. Not a clap, not a breath. The room was frozen, like they'd forgotten how to move. Then Victor stood clapping slowly, his hands trembling. Others joined, hesitant at first, then louder until the ballroom shook with applause. Clara wiped her eyes, her clapping fierce. The event host, a man named Richard in a crisp suit, rushed to the stage, his face a mix of shock and awe. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice breaking. "How did you just do that?" Lisa handed the violin back to Ethan, who took it like he was in a daze. "I'm Lisa Adams," she said, her voice steady. "I was a music scholarship student. I left the stage for family reasons." She paused, looking out at the crowd, her eyes calm but piercing. "Tonight I just wanted to remind people, art is meant to lift others, not tear them down." The room was still clapping, but the mood had shifted. Margaret stood off to the side, her face tight, her diamonds suddenly looking garish. Ethan stared at the floor, the violin limp in his hands. People started approaching Lisa, their voices soft, apologetic. "I didn't know a man in a tux," said, his eyes downcast. "That was incredible," said a woman holding out her phone like she wanted a selfie. Lisa smiled politely but didn't linger. She stepped off the stage, her movements as quiet as they'd been all night. Tom met her near the bar, his face lit up. "Lisa, that was unreal," he said, shaking his head. "Why didn't you tell me?" She shrugged, adjusting her bag. Didn't seem important. As Lisa moved toward the exit, a young woman in a staff uniform carrying a tray of empty glasses paused near her. Her name tag read Maria, and her eyes were bright with something like pride. She leaned in, her voice low. "I heard you play," she said, her accent thick. "My brother plays violin back home. You made me believe he could do this someday." Lisa stopped, her face softening. She touched Maria's arm lightly. "Tell him to keep playing." Maria nodded, her smile wide, and slipped back into the crowd. The moment was small, but it lingered, a quiet testament to the impact Lisa didn't even realize she'd made. As she spoke, a man in a dark suit approached his presence, cutting through the crowd. He was older, maybe 60, with a face that carried authority without trying. The room seemed to shift when he walked in, conversations pausing, eyes darting. He didn't speak loudly, didn't need to. "Lisa," he said, his voice low but warm. "You ready to go?" She nodded, her face softening for the first time all night. "Yeah, David. Let's go." The crowd parted as they walked toward the exit, his hand resting lightly on her back. Nobody needed to say his name. They knew who he was, a man whose name opened doors, whose influence reshaped rooms. Margaret looked away, her hands twisting her clutch. Ethan stood frozen, like he'd just realized the size of his mistake. A woman in the back whispered to her friend, "That's David Adams." Her husband. The friend's eyes widened. "She's that Lisa Adams." The whispers spread a ripple through the room, but Lisa didn't turn back. She walked with David, her steps steady, her silence louder than the applause. The next day, the gala was everywhere. Clips of Lisa's performance racked up millions of views. The woman in the simple dress, they called her a hashtag that trended for weeks. Margaret Voss faced a brutal reckoning. Her mocking comments caught on the live stream went viral. By the end of the week, her charity board asked her to step down, citing conduct unbecoming. Her name, once a staple in gala circles, became a cautionary tale. She didn't make a statement. She didn't need to. The internet had spoken. Ethan Carter's fall was quieter, but no less final. His smug challenge was replayed endlessly, his smirk a meme. His agent dropped him, and his next performance was canceled. He posted an apology online, but it was drowned out by the noise. Vanessa lost her sponsorship with a luxury brand after her comments were clipped and shared. Others who'd laughed that night faded into the background, their names tied to a moment they couldn't escape. 2 days after the gala, Sophia Lang's father, the famous conductor, issued a public apology for his daughter's behavior. Sophia's social media accounts went private, but not before screenshots of her mocking comments spread. Her invitation to an upcoming music festival was rescinded, her name quietly removed from the program. Roland Finch, the Broadway producer, faced his own backlash when a theater blog reposted his taunts, calling him out for bullying. His latest show lost investors, and his name became a punchline in industry circles. Lisa didn't watch the fallout. She was back home, a small apartment in Brooklyn, sitting at her kitchen table with a cup of tea. David was there reading the paper, his glasses low on his nose. "They're still talking about you," he said, glancing up. She smiled just a little. Let them talk. She didn't need the validation. Her life wasn't about proving herself, it was about living quietly on her terms. A week later, an envelope arrived from the New York Symphony signed by an esteemed conductor. "We'd be honored to have you perform with us," it read. Lisa read it twice, then set it down. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She folded the letter and tucked it into a drawer next to an old photo of her at 17 playing in a scholarship recital, her face lit with focus. The story of that night grew, but for those who were there, it was about a woman who stood in a room full of cruelty and didn't break. A woman who answered mockery with grace, who turned judgment into awe. For those who'd ever been looked down on, ever been told they didn't belong, her story was a quiet promise. You're enough. You always were. The world might not see it right away, but that doesn't make it less true. Just keep standing. Just keep walking. The truth catches up. Where are you watching from? Leave a comment below and hit follow to walk with me through heartbreak, betrayal, and finally healing.